I think we can get started now. I'm getting the nod, yes. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's seminar. In honor of Falls Prevention Month, which I know is a very important topic with really significant implications for many people, including many people on this call, we're going to be exploring some exciting developments and technologies that are helping us understand and predict falls. My name is Dr. Jennifer Campos. As the Associate Scientific Director of AgeWell, I am thrilled to be bringing you this fascinating and important update on research into falls prevention. It's also a topic near and dear to my heart and really central to some of my own core research program as well. But before we get to all that, I'd like to acknowledge that although we are meeting virtually today, we do operate on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations, which have cared for the land for thousands of years, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. This land remains home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty, which is an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I am grateful for the opportunity to work on this land today, and you may live and work in different territories, so we encourage you to reflect on the land on which you are located and to consider your relationship to that land and to the people who are the traditional keepers of that land. Thank you. I'd also like to share with you a bit of information about AgeWell. So AgeWell is Canada's technology and aging network, whose vision is that Canada's leadership in technology and aging, something called Age Tech, benefits the world. AgeWell's mission is to develop a community of researchers, older adults, caregivers, partners, and future leaders that accelerates the development of technology-based solutions that make a meaningful difference in the lives of Canadians. That translates into support for 250 researchers at 47 universities and research centers in Canada, over 1,200 research trainees, over 60 Canadian age tech startups, over 170 technologies, services, policies, and practices in development or on the market, 4 national innovation hubs, and 5,000 plus engaged older adults and caregivers, many of whom are joining us today. So I thank you very much for coming. Now, the most important part, we're here to welcome our 2 speakers today. So first up will be Dr. Andrea Iaboni. Andrea, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been working on?
Hello, everyone. I'm a geriatric psychiatrist and a scientist here at Toronto Rehab. And I do work on different kinds of technology and how we can use it to prevent falls and care for older adults with dementia.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrea. And we are also very pleased to introduce Dr. Shahroz Khan. Shahroz, thank you so much for coming. Tell us a bit about yourself and why why research into falls is personal for you.
Thanks, Jenny. So my name is Shahroz Khan. I'm a scientist at KITE. I'm a computer scientist, but my research program is around developing AI techniques for aging and rehabilitation. And I'm going to talk today about fall detection, some of the privacy protecting work that we have been doing. And since you asked for this personal thing, so I'll maybe talk about when I give my presentation, why this is very relevant to what I'm doing.
Okay, sounds perfect. Okay, so before we get going, I just wanted to mention a couple of housekeeping things. So just to let everybody know, we will be addressing as many of your questions as we can after our 2 panelists have presented. So any questions or comments as they occur to you, just please go ahead and type them into the chat function on Zoom. And I already see some of these coming up in the chat box. We'd also love for you to share with us who you are and where you're joining us from today as we come together to discuss and learn about this really important topic. If you aren't familiar with the chat function, it's the icon that's shaped like a little speech bubble. And if you click on that icon, you'll open the box where you can enter any questions or comments. And we're really keen to hear about what you're thinking and what you're wondering about. So please include any of those thoughts and questions in the chat box. We'll also be recording today's session, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it again, it's a lot of information, and I'm sure a lot to take in, and so you may want to review, or if you want to share it with someone else, we really encourage that, and it will be located in YouTube after today. So with the housekeeping out of the way, I am delighted to hand things over to Dr. Andrea Iaboni. Andrea, tell us what you've been working on and how technology is playing such an exciting part in it.
I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this. Let me get my slides up for you to have a look at. So one more step and then they'll be ready. Okay. Does that look okay? Are we all right? Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone for joining today. I'm really pleased to talk to you about this. I'm very passionate about the topic of falls. It's where my research all started. And I'll come to in a minute why as a geriatric psychiatrist. So I would be interested in this topic. Just so you know, I am not, I don't have any conflicts of interest about this work. Nobody is paying me to promote any particular product. And to give you a sense of what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to start off by talking a bit about why people fall and the concept of stability. And then I'm going to go into a little bit about my research on a study we call the Ambient study or the Ambient Project, and how we use technology to monitor your stability. And so a lot of people have come to me and asked, why is it that I had that fall? Why is it that I'm falling more now than I used to? And what can I do to stop myself from falling? And so I like to think about falls in some way quite simply. They kind of come in two parts. The first thing that happens is that something has thrown off your balance in some way. And that could be something that's going on inside of you. So it could be that you're distracted or that you're sleepy, something that means that you're not controlling your balance as well as you normally do. Or it could be something outside of you that's thrown off your balance. Maybe somebody brushed up against you, you caught your foot on a step. And then that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to fall once you're thrown off balance, because actually are thrown off balance many times in a day, and we don't always fall many times in a day. And so what the next thing that happens is that you are actually unable to recover your balance in that moment, either because your balance was thrown off so much that it exceeded the capacity of your stability systems to recover, or your stability systems were just not working very well, and so therefore you fell. And so when I'm talking about stability, what I'm referring to are all the resources that we have in us that keep us upright. And so they're all the things that help us resist when we're thrown off balance. And people have stability that can be really high or really low. You can imagine a gymnast when they're standing on the balance beam, that's somebody who has a very high degree of stability. And then somebody who is not feeling very well, who may be quite frail, would have a lower level of stability. And these resources that support stability are actually many. There are things like muscle strength. So, that makes a lot of sense. If you're strong, if you have good endurance, that helps you to recover more easily if you get thrown off balance. Sensory functions like your vision, your hearing, the sensation you have in your feet, all of those are really important to help support your stability, your balance, your reflexes, how you walk, your walking patterns, and also how your cognition, how attentive you are, how you are able to multitask. All of those are things that are important for supporting your stability. And so things that support stability are things that build up those resources. So what can you put in the bank to help support your stability, build your stability wealth. And so we think about sensory aids. So if you wear your glasses, that gives you, you know, an advantage over if you're not wearing your glasses, or your hearing aids. If you're wearing proper footwear, that makes sure that your feet are making good contact with the ground. Exercise, making sure you're getting good sleep. And then this last one is kind of a catch-all, which is avoiding things that might make your stability worse. And so that might be things like alcohol. So you might not be able to drink as well as you used to in terms of holding your alcohol. That might affect your stability more significantly. And some medications can actually throw off your stability. And that's where I started my interest in this work, was the idea that sometimes as a doctor, I might prescribe someone a medication that throws off their stability and puts them at higher risk of falling, and wondering about how I could learn that, how I could monitor whether someone's stability was negatively impacted by something I prescribed. And so this is where I came to the idea of how can we monitor stability? And so stability, because you know it's so important in terms of preventing falls, and in other regards as well, it's a marker of our health status. But it's kind of hard to tell sometimes if your stability is a bit off. But if we can measure stability over time, that might tell us whether someone's becoming at higher risk of falls or higher risk of another adverse event. And so this is the Ambient Project, and I work with my co-investigator who's Babak Tati, who's an engineer. He does the engineering side of things and I do the clinical side of things. And we've been really fortunate to get funding from a variety of different programs, including AgeWell. And in this project, we set up a camera on an inpatient unit here at Toronto Rehab called the Specialized Dementia Unit. And the camera was set up so it was triggered when a research participant came down the hall, and it would capture a video of that person walking. Over the course of the study, we had 54 people and we captured almost 5,000 walks. And during the time people were in the study, there were 78 falls in these individuals. These people were people who are very high risk of falls for a number of different reasons, including the fact that they have dementia and were on a lot of medications. And one of the things that we learned was that we could actually estimate a measure of stability called the margin of stability that looks at people's center of mass, so kind of like around where the center of your pelvis is, how that moves from side to side as they move forward, and how close that comes to going beyond their base of support. And base of support is where your feet are on the ground. So if you can imagine, if you lean out past your base of support, then you're coming very close to the edge of your stability. And how often people came very close to their margins turned out to be a really important marker. And it told us how many falls someone was going to have and how long it was going to be until they had their next fall. And so this measure was quite a novel and interesting thing that we found in this study. And it combined with other information, like whether someone has fallen recently and some measures of balance, was a really important predictor of falls. And the other great thing about this camera-based system was it meant that we could measure people's walking basically every day. We could capture a video of them and see if their walking was changing over time. And from that, we can measure their margin of stability over time and see if they're getting better or worse, and then look back to see what might be contributing to these changes. So where we are right now with this study, we have moved away from using a fancy Kinect camera and are actually now just using plain old video, surveillance video type cameras to track people's movements and their bodies. And we're doing different kinds of fancy artificial intelligence, machine learning models that put this information in and then tell us what someone's odds are of falling in the next month. And so from that, we can get an idea if their risk of falling is going up or going down based on how their stability is changing. And so in summary, your stability is a really important factor that keeps you upright, because in a lot of ways, sometimes we can't avoid being thrown off balance. Life is like that. It, throws you off balance sometimes. So you have to shore up your stability so that you're able to respond, kind of create a bit of a resilience around your balance and your falls prevention. And so that's, like I said, exercise, making sure you're taking care with your with all of those risk factors that I mentioned earlier. And so we now know that we can use video images to monitor changes in stability over time, and that we are also able to tell when someone's stability is getting worse. And so this puts us in a really interesting position to see if we can figure out why someone might be getting worse, and so that we can take an action to prevent falls. And so that's the end of my presentation. I think we're going to take questions at the end. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you so much, Andrea, for a really interesting and important presentation describing a really exciting project with such huge potential. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Shiroz Khan.
Hi, good afternoon from Toronto. So can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks. So Andrea talked about the fall prevention and the stability, and I'm going to talk a different aspect of falls, which is more detecting falls. And so let me start with a little bit of a personal story. So when I came to Canada like 12 years ago, I did not know what frost is. And, coming from India, warmer place. And around this time of the year, December, I was just walking in my sneakers without knowing. And then, my hands in my jeans. And then I just slipped and tripped and I had a terrible fall. Right? And it was so sudden. It was so quick. I couldn't understand. And I lost my balance, as Andrea is saying. So that gave me a little bit of perspective. And when I started exploring my PhD topic, fall detection was one of the most important topic that I thought has a lot of impact. Now, in terms of falls, we know that falls are actually responsible for a lot of these unintentional and intentional, like unintentional injuries. And among older adults, they're at high risk of falling, and it could lead to serious injuries, even deaths in certain cases. And there's an enormous healthcare cost. And apart from the fall, like it's the thing that happens after the fall. A lot of people develop mental and physical health concerns. Fear of falling, social isolation. People do not go out. Like so many things are associated with falls. Now, in a traditional setting, falls can be detected using various sensors, various sensing modalities, including cameras, wearable devices. Nowadays, we have Apple Watches and other commercial devices that claim to detect falls, and we have more advanced sensors like radar sensors and stuff like that. And the general approach is that they collect the sensor data, and if there are some variations, because when you fall, you change, you lose your balance. And there are readings in the sensor that you can tap in and say that maybe a fall has occurred. Or there are some standard machine learning approaches that you can try. But then the bigger challenge with falls is that falls do not occur frequently. Even in people with high propensity of falling, they do not fall all the time, right? And there are studies that shows us that even in long-term care residents, it's like few falls per year. And then falls also occur very diversely. We do not fall in a particular way. So, for example, if you're doing normal activities like sitting, standing, walking, jumping, I may walk slower than you. I may run faster than you. I may have a little bit of different posture, but then there is a particular pattern that associated with walking. But then, like walking or sitting or standing, but then falling can happen in so many ways. And it's really hard to collect data for falls. So, some researchers also collect artificial falls data in simulated environment, but we know that they may not be true representative of falls. There are other issues in this area of research, related to, like, as I said, data collection, ethics, clearances. You need to make sure that you're not hurting your own participants, right? You don't want untoward incidents happening in your lab or in their home setting. A lot of the people may not use these wearable devices, for example. There are privacy issues when we want to develop these solutions for a real world situation. A lot of the people also complain about the invasiveness of these sensors. So we started looking at it from a different perspective. Can we use other types of camera modalities, like a thermal camera or a depth camera to detect these falls? Now, thermal camera, you may know that traditionally it is used by firefighters to actually locate if there are a heat draft in your house or apartment or things like that. And there are depth cameras which can actually make this silhouette kind of figure based on the distance based on the distance from the camera. Now, in both these modalities, it is hard to see the facial features, so it partially obfuscate the facial identity of the person. And to detect falls, we don't need to see your face, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. We don't need to know who you are. We just can analyze your body movements and should be able to detect it. So the research question that we came up with was that, can we detect falls by training these AI models on only the normal behaviors in a non-invasive manner? Why just the normal behaviors? Because, as I said, it is easy to collect lots and lots of data for normal activities, but you may collect very few data on falls. Now, the problem is when you're trying to build AI models, one of this normal class will dominate the minority class, and it will be really, really hard to train a classifier. So we took an approach, what we call as anomaly detection approach, where we train our AI models on lots and lots of this normal data, which is easy to collect, and then try to detect fall as an anomaly. So I'm going to show you this little demo. So we collect so this data is collected through a thermal camera, and you will see a person entering the scene and then the fall. We only train our neural network model on the normal activities. We never showed the model what a fall looks like. And it's going to give you a score. And whenever it sees something unusual, like a fall happening, the score will rise. So you will see here, the model has not seen this video. So you'll see right now it's empty frame. Now the person is going to enter the scene. Just hold on. Come on. Yeah. So now the person enters the scene. This is the reconstruction is our model is reconstructing what is happening, and then they're going to fall. And then you see there is a sharp peak. This is very, very interesting result for us because we never train our model on what a fall may look like. And I'm going to show you one more quick result on another data that is collected through depth cameras. So here, these are different types of cameras, but here you will see person will come. There is a safety mat there. They come and then they fall down, and again we see a peak. In both the cases, like as I said, we did not teach the neural network what a fall looks like. We only tell them what a normal activity may look like. And this is pretty interesting approach in terms of detecting these type of events that do not occur all the time. Inspired by these results, we published these results as well. We actually collected data in our own laboratory, more in a more realistic setting, where we place these overhead cameras into our lab, and we collected data from multiple types of cameras. So this is one of our team member that you can see. He's lying. He actually he's simulating a fall. So we collected this data. So you can see we're using infrared cameras that can work quite good in even in the night situation. Then we have depth cameras. Then we have a thermal camera. We also have a regular camera for comparison and another depth camera. So we place 4 or 5 cameras over the head. So we collected this data already from 30 younger adults and 10 older adults, and we built some models around it. So this is our progress in this work. And yeah, I'll be happy to, talk more about it if you have questions, and yeah, and have a discussion around your thoughts about how we can incorporate some of these things in a real world situation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shiroz. So I'm going to encourage everybody to use the chat to put any of your questions. I'll maybe start by just asking a question. So, Andrea, you had talked about this eloquent way that you can, look at to see if someone, has changes in their behavior that may indicate that they're at risk of falling. What do you do after that point? Once you've seen that someone is at risk, what kind of interventions or approaches would you take to mitigate future risk?
I think it's so part of the idea about being able to track people's level of stability over time is that we probably all start from a certain set point where we are. And that what we're trying to avoid is people losing stability, getting worse. And so if we are able to detect that someone's stability is dropping, then I think that's an opportunity for us to go back to thinking about what are those stability shoring up kind of resources that we have. And so first thinking about if there's anything interfering with those resources. So do we need new glasses? Do we need hearing aids? Do we need to replace those shoes? Has someone started drinking or, started on a new medication that might be interfering with those systems of stability? And then it might be, considering, have they been unwell recently? Maybe they haven't been exercising as much. Maybe there's some loss of muscle strength or endurance. And so then the solutions, I think, kind of fall from that assessment, right? So, okay, they, become a bit weaker or deconditioned after an illness. What we need to do now is bolster that up, get them into a rehab program of some kind and get them stronger. Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. How well equipped do you think is our as a physician, as a clinician who does this and has expertise in it, how well do you think this is being done, broadly speaking? This obviously takes a multidisciplinary kind of sort of interprofessional approach. There's something that could be done better with respect to ensuring that, for instance, someone who maybe, does have some sensory problems gets referred to, an ophthalmologist or an audiologist as appropriate. How what is the pipeline of this and how does that look? And can we be doing?
I think, that this comes down to this idea of having more comprehensive care for older adults and a real understanding of why all of these things are really important and how they work together. One of my motivations for doing this work was that, I didn't see my patients very often, because in a specialty practice, you might see them once every 3 or 6 months. And so someone would come back and see me after I hadn't seen them in 6 months, and I would immediately think they look so different. Their walking seems different. Something has changed over the past 6 months. And when you ask the family, they might not have noticed it because the changes happen so slowly over that period of time that it's not easy for them to make that comparison to what they were like 6 months ago. And I think this is a problem that we all have, that subtle changes that happen slowly over a long period of time we can miss. And so that was one of the reasons for wanting to have a system that could help us really identify when those changes were happening. But you're right that, I think sometimes older adults also have to be advocates for themselves. They have to say, I don't feel quite right. Like, I feel more unsteady. I feel like something is off, and then really, getting their collaboration of their physician or the physiotherapist or whoever they're working with to kind of try to problem solve around that.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Okay, we have had some questions pop up. So, Dr. Iaboni, what baseline measures of balance were used, and were these measures performed iteratively?
In our study, we used the Tinnetti POMA balance score. And the one I don't know, I'm not saying that one is better than any other in particular. The reason we use it is because our population are people who have cognitive impairment, and it's one that you can do a little bit more easily, if they don't always understand the instructions. The instructions are quite simple and such. That's the one that we used, and we found that it was actually pretty strongly associated with with our measures of stability that we measured through the camera. But on its own, it was not a strong predictor of falls. But when you combined it with the stability measure, it did become a good predictor of falls. So yeah, and we only measured it at 2 instances, at the beginning and the end of the study. And it's a good question, like how these observational assessments how good are they at picking up these changes? And so sometimes if we can repeat those things, I would do measurement-based care where we're actually trying to measure, whether it be by a camera or just by a tool. I think those are really important practices.
Yeah, that is a really important detail. That's a great question. Okay, on to the next question. Did either of you gather any data or perform secondary research on injury rates as a result of falls for older adults? And if so, what kinds of rates did you see?
I don't know if you want to speak about injury rates, Charles, or do you? I can't. I'm sorry. I don't have the number at the top of my head. You know, like the majority of falls don't result in injuries. You know, injuries represent a minority of falls, but because there are so many falls, falls are still a major contributor to injuries in older adults. So I don't have the exact numbers, I'm afraid, at hand. That's a good question.
Yeah, me neither, because in our study, we actually made sure that nobody gets hurt, So, and especially the older adults that we asked to come to our lab, they were excluded from falling. But it is interesting, some of the participants, I mean, they were not expected to fall, but some of them very enthusiastic, and they wanted to let us know. So they did, but we did not record those because we were not allowed to do that. Only the healthy, the younger population was allowed to fall. But it's really good to get their feedback. Yeah, so we don't have numbers, but maybe if we deploy this kind of system in a long-term monitoring in a community setting, we may have some of those numbers. Yes.
Okay, great. I should be mentioning the names of the people asking this question, so I'll change my approach here. So Lesia asks, can you comment about utility? For example, can the OT video in the home, can the occupational therapist take a video in the home and send it in for feedback? And do patients have to come to the clinic? Given the stretch on healthcare, how fast and easily can this be implemented?
Actually, this is for me. This is for measuring the stability using a video. So we haven't designed yet a system to provide a lab-based assessment of stability. It's a really something that we've talked about and considered. It's a good idea that you could easily film someone walking towards a camera and then calculate their stability from that if you had the algorithm that we use. So that's a good question and something I'm glad to hear that you're interested in that, and maybe something that we'll look more into. I think the challenge is that one reading is so far is not that meaningful. What's been more meaningful in ours is repeated readings, every day over a long period of time. So we have to, I think, do more research to understand what you could learn from a single one-off reading of or even like repeated cross-sectional assessment of gait stability. We haven't looked at that yet.
Okay, great. I think this may be a question for both of you from Julie. Was this technology used in a real world setting like long-term care? And if so, how did you manage the issue regarding privacy and usage of cameras to identify patients? So I think Shiro's reflected on this a little bit already, but maybe you could both comment on the setting in which the data was collected and then also privacy issues.
You want to go first, Charles?
Yeah, so in our study, we recorded actual patients, but like the whole idea of using this privacy-preserving modalities is that can we use some of these cameras like thermal cameras or depth cameras or infrared cameras, which do not reveal, I mean, you can still reconstruct who the person is or what they're doing, but you may not see the exact facial features. So indirectly, we can take care of the privacy concerns, but we are also in conversation with some other industry partners. There is a company, AltumView. They have developed a camera which does not transmit your image, but only just the body joints. So you will see like a sticky man or a sticky person kind of figure. Because we don't need to see, like, as I said, we don't need to see your face to detect falls because it's more related to emotion. So, so that is something of a lot of interest to us, where we just see a stick person, moving around in the scene. So, yeah. So these are the ways we can handle privacy. Yeah.
And our system we've collected data on our unit here in a long-term care home, and we've just recently set it up in a retirement home. And we typically put it in places where there are already surveillance cameras. So we wouldn't put them in someone's private room because we want to pick people walking down a long corridor. So it's typically in a hallway and where there already is a camera. And we've set, it's set up in such a way that the video images, like Shiro says, are not captured. It's the video is recorded, but then the skeleton figure that information is extracted from the video, and that's the information that is analyzed and transmitted. So that's in part how we address some of the privacy issues. And of course, when we're doing research, we only capture research participants, and we've done that through a variety of ways, using tags that identify them to the camera or using facial recognition.
Okay, excellent. Here's, I think, just a comment directed to Andrea from Morella, who mentions that she also uses the Tinnetti and complement it with the tug sometimes, and finds the Tinnetti very appropriate to use with this population. So on some of the baseline measures you mentioned earlier. Great to see Sherry here. Sherry asks, what role does the fear of falling play in the increased likelihood of falling?
It's a good question. I have actually an interest in fear of falling as a psychiatrist. It would make sense that and it's interesting because so people can either have an appropriate caution around falling. If they are unsteady, you would want to be appropriately anxious and cautious about it. But the concern really is around if somebody has an exaggerated or inappropriate fear that sort of is beyond what is really necessary or excessive given the level of stability that someone has. And so then sometimes if that's the case, then they can use a lot of maladaptive or strategies that are not a bit counterproductive. So you see someone walking with an excessively cautious walk that actually probably interferes with some of their normal gait rhythms and can make them more at risk of falling. And then of course there are other behaviors that come out of being fearful of falling, like not walking very much, not getting out, not exercising, and then that's counterproductive as well. So it's about, I think, finding that right balance about like what's the appropriate amount of caution. And for most people, it's probably just doing what you need to do to bolster up your stability, and then allowing yourself to walk in a way that where your attention is fairly focused and where you're not putting yourself in excessively hazardous situations, and that's enough caution. Using your gait aids, if you've been recommended to use one, using it. So following your physiotherapist's advice is a good one as well.
I would just add to it that like, again, in my personal experience, somebody in my family, she had a fall, and then she was so scared to go out, like she just stopped going out, meeting people, and I can see that it also had a negative impact on their mental health. They're socially isolated, they're living a very lonely life, not participating in their even daily activities, so they lost a lot of weight, lot of muscle weight. They're not taking part even in any rehab exercises, right? So it's a downward kind of journey beyond that point. So you need to, like as Andrea said, take your physiotherapist as advice, take part in these activities, and as long as you can, like you don't have to force it. But apart from the physical aspect, there are negative mental health consequences that can also take a toll on you, right?
Okay, great. So a question for either panelist: did you see increases in time in double support over time as predictive of increased fall risk? So I guess this is looking at specific kind of gait parameters.
Oh, this is an interesting question. I've in this study, I'm trying to remember if that was one of the measures that we measured, double support time. Doesn't recall that we looked at double support time in particular, but it's an interesting measure. And I've done other studies where I've looked at double support time, and particularly in older adults with depression, and seen that as their depression improves, their double support time goes down. So for people who don't know what I'm talking about, it's the amount of time that you spend with both of your feet on the ground, as opposed to having one foot on the ground and one foot in the air. And people with a lot of double support time are walking very cautiously. They're kind of lifting their foot and putting it right back down again. And so, so yeah, that was one of the, I have found, I think that it is probably a form of cautious gait, but we didn't look at it in our study, I'm afraid.
Rose?
Oh, nothing to add, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question, Philip. From Tracy, it's actually good to hear that the majority of falls don't result in injury. That is definitely great.
Yeah.
But is there any indication of how many needed help getting back up? This is a big question and a big problem, especially for people living at home.
Yeah, this is more, I think, Dr. Khan's, because I mean, in one way, the rationale for his system is being able to find when someone has fallen and come to their aid. Do you know how often someone falls and can't get up? Shiraz?
So this is a very good question. In our studies so far, we did not encounter this kind of situation. But like as I said, the next phase of this work is to deploy this system in the community. So then we'll have more answers around that. But we know from the literature, we know that there have been some incidences where people have not been able to get up after a fall. You know, there was an incident in BC, in British Columbia, where somebody, unfortunately, an older adult, was trapped in their apartment, you know, and they fell in the bathroom and they could not get up, and he was living alone. And it was really, really sad story. After 2-3 days, I think somebody noticed some noises from their apartment and they came to the rescue. So we know some of these really bad stories. So that is why we wanted to have these kind of systems when people are unable to get up. So in our home lab at KITE, we had kind of a prototype system. I don't know if it's functional right now or not, but my postdoc supervisor, Dr. Alex, he was working on the system where the system can communicate with you. So, you know, if a person fall down, then the system detects and then asks some questions, you know, hey, are you okay? Do you want me to call somebody, or can you get up? Things like that. So I think those kind of things can be helpful, and we have these emergency alarms kind of buttons, you know, that you can press. Yeah. But in our study, we don't have those numbers, but this is something to look for in future. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shiroz. And I know, that is some of the limitations of other systems too, right? Is that you have to activate a button, and it's often something you wear and you have to remember to put it on, and you have to be conscious, in order to be able to activate it and not injured, and all kinds of implications there. So
yeah.
Okay, so from Morella, she's asking, do you have any idea about the cost of implementing these technologies?
Yeah. You go ahead first.
Yeah, so I can tell. So we are actually not targeting very expensive devices here. So most of the cameras that we have worked, they're like literally off the shelf. In the Canadian context, $200, something in that range. And my expectation is with time, as these technologies become more available, the cost should not be a barrier. You know, even these thermal cameras, you can put it, I mean, traditionally they used to be very expensive, like in thousands of dollars, but now they can be attached on a smartphone, like $150 to $200 kind of piece of hardware. So moving forward, so we are not looking for thousands of dollars of, very specialized camera. Maybe there is a little bit of piece of hardware that we may have to develop for real-time functioning, but the camera itself, we are not targeting or looking at very, very expensive cameras. These are regular cameras,
Yeah, to add to that, I think what we're trying to develop is not even a system or any hardware. We're developing really the software that would analyze existing video feeds, right? So if you already have video surveillance set up in a long-term care home or in the hallways of a retirement home, that what our system would actually be a software that would feed that information, that video stream through, and then calculate some of these measures just from the regular cameras. So the cost is really actually upfront in developing the algorithms. It's the work that we're doing now, in getting enough videos, validating some of the algorithms, making sure that they are unbiased, that they are making predictions that are actually clinically useful. And so that's where all the investment but once the actual system should be actually relatively simple to run and inexpensive.
Okay, fantastic. So Julie asks, do you know through your research the extent to which falls rates can be prevented or reduced in long-term care?
That's a big question about what kind of an impact can this have? And so I don't believe that every fall can be prevented. I think that if people walk, so long as people are upright, there will be times where they will no longer be upright and they will come to rest on the ground. And we obviously want people to be able to move, and because movement is obviously so important to quality of life. And so in long-term care, there are always going to be some falls because these are people who are frail and at the limits of their stability. But I think that there are within this environment some falls that could be prevented with if we understood that people's falls risk were increasing, if we understood that what was happening to contribute to those increased in fall risk. So there are, I see falls related to medications, falls related to people becoming sick, unwell, they're developing an infection and they're getting unsteady. And so if we are able to detect those changes sooner, I think that some falls could be prevented, but I'm also realistic about not all falls being preventable.
Okay, thank you very much. Now from Farah, what is the age criteria you worked with, and was it in combination with other medical cases such as dementia, Alzheimer's?
Is that for me?
It probably applies to, yeah. So maybe start with Andrea.
So for our study, it was specifically people with dementia who were in our study. And we chose that population because they're at higher risk of falls, and we knew that they are large numbers of falls in this group. And it was important for our study that we capture a lot of falls in our study so that we could then understand what was contributing to them. And so so with older people, I think the average age was mid 70s or late 70s, and people with dementia.
Yeah, in our study, it was healthy older adults, not with any cognitive impairment. And I think the average age was around 70s. In the 70s, I do not remember the exact number, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sherry asks, have you done any research with older adults who are living independently in their own home?
So so that's the plan. That's what I want to do, actually. So we have been working for many years with wearable technology and camera technology, and now I think we are at a point where we have some confidence, and this is what actually I would like to do in the coming year or so to run some of these and test or validate these algorithms in the homes of people living in the community. Yeah, so maybe next year.
Perfect. Okay. And a question from Galere.
And it's just not the falls, like there are. No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Charles. I think there was a delay, but you go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I was just saying, like, it's just not the falls. I mean, falls is one thing that we can detect, but when we go into a home setting, there can be other things that are happening. So for example, people with dementia, often they exhibit other behaviors of risk like agitation, aggression. So there are many things that can be done with this type of technology. It's just not like just only falls, right? So me and Dr. Andrea are also working on other projects where we are looking at other behaviors of risk, So I think this can be applied in detecting other kind of behaviors that can cause some harm. Yeah.
Okay, great. From Galere, Dr. Iaboni, would a camera-based stability analysis impact the way people walk in the clinic if it only happens in the clinic? So is this clinical measurement feasible if we want to measure the stability over time? Would other biomarkers be beneficial to use instead of a camera-based stability analysis?
Well, there's a few parts to that question. So the data that we were collecting on our unit was what we call natural gait. So people didn't, because quite quickly you forget that there's a camera there. And so this was just people doing their thing, walking down the corridor. And I think that there is some value to that. I think that people are on their best behavior when they're walking in a lab with their clinical team. You know, they are focused, they're, going from A to B, and they're really trying hard to walk well, as opposed to how people walk when they're not being observed. And so I think that in part, that was part of the value of the system, was that. And I've kind of forgotten the other part of that question. Sorry.
So the last part of the question was, the clinical measurement feasible if we want to measure stability over time, or would other biomarkers be beneficial to use instead of the camera-based stability analysis?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's value to measuring over time. I don't have any evidence about which other markers are particularly useful. But if you are in your clinic and you are assessing older adults and you want to understand how their stability is going, like doing the same assessment, one that you think is pretty sensitive and responsive to change at each visit, I think is a really good start. And then as we bring out these technologies and as they're available, you can start adding them to sort of enhance that. I have a PhD student who's a physiotherapist right now, working on a project on how physiotherapists assess stability and different and how they can use this kind of extra information, how they can use this to enhance their decision making. So I don't think it ever even replaces clinical assessment for people. But if you are given this additional information about how someone is walking at home or how their gait stability has changed as measured more quantitatively, how do we use that information? So that's her PhD project, and so maybe I'll have some answers for you after she finishes.
Okay, a question from Donna, and I think this is a question that many of us have thought about or asked in the past in lots of different personal circumstances and situations. But she mentions that she fell twice in the last couple of months in the same place in her home. Who should she contact? A practitioner or an organization to assess what she needs in that place, or even around her house to prevent future falls? What can she do? What resources are available?
It's a great question. And obviously resources vary a lot depending on where you are and where you live. I'll give you the ideal situation, is that if you're falling repeatedly at home, it's really ideal to have someone come and assess your home and assess what risk factors might be present. So I talked earlier about internal and external factors that affect, that throw off your balance. And so there are all kinds of things in our home environment that throw us off, and they may not be immediately obvious to you. And so, so having a professional like an occupational therapist, they're really good at saying, maybe right here, if this is a challenging spot for you, maybe you need a bar here, or we need to move this rug, or, what is it that adjust the furniture a bit so it's, not such a tight space, whatever it might be, that they might be able to understand better what's contributing to your falls at home. And then, so that's one person. That's about understanding your environment, and then understanding your own stability, speaking to your family doctor, going to see a physiotherapist, or going to a falls prevention program if that's available in your region. Falls prevention programs are really amazing. There's very good evidence that they are helpful at reducing the number of falls that people have. And so I strongly recommend those.
Great. And you mentioned in your presentation too, and I'll emphasize, taking care of your sensory health is also important. I think we recognize that if our vision is declining, that may be contributing to some of our instability, but hearing loss is also actually a risk factor for falls. And many of us don't know. We start losing our hearing at the age of around 21, and there are declines there. So getting all of those things checked out again, if the opportunity is available for you, for looking at visiting your optometrist or your audiologist, or talking to your family physician about what's available in that case as well. Okay. Now Julie asks if they are interested in testing or implementing your technology, how would they do that?
So I can say, so I think the way it works is, so right now we're not like collecting data for our study, but like, as I said, we have a plan, moving into the community. So, but then we have to go through the ethics approval and all that. Normally we reach out to, to old adults and through our patient partners, and Age Well, I think is a great place to look out for any of these recruitment that is happening. Yeah, I mean, that is great that if there is an interest, I think it's always good if you can let us know in advance that you're interested. So if something is coming up, we can also reach out to you in person. But normally we advertise through these channels, UHN, Age Well, also social media, email lists. So keep an eye on that. Yeah. Andrea, I think for you, it's very different, right? Because it's in a unit, right?
At the moment, yeah. I mean, but we have been talking about having an app or having a way of calculating it. And so again, yeah, same idea. Once it's ready to be for prime time, we'll make sure to let people know through AgeWell and other sources like that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, oh, sorry, I lost my question. There it is. Okay, so Karen, who's an OT with the Dementia Society of Ottawa and Renfrew County, part of the new Adapt Your Home program, asks, Dr. Khan, did your research look into comparing the effectiveness of different wearable devices for detecting falls, such as an Apple Watch versus a Lifeline, etc.?
Yeah, that is a very good question, Karen. Thanks for asking that. First part of my research was only actually dedicated to wearable devices. I was not specifically verifying Apple Watches or Android watches, but more because they use sensors, accelerometers, gyroscopes. So that's what we did. And what we found is that accelerometers and all are quite good in detecting these movements. Falls can be detected. But then there are several challenges. One is the compliance issue. Like you have to wear the watch all the time, or the sensor has to be tucked to your body or a trunk, all the time. I mean, you can even use like a smartphone because the phone also has those sensors, right? So you can use, there are apps that can detect falls, but then you have to carry them all the time. Secondly, false positive rates are very high. So I can just move my hands quickly or just sit quickly on a chair and the system would think it's a fall. So that can be a nuisance. It can be a problem if you're raising alarm so often or more than what it is required. I think but then cameras also have limitation. One of the limitation is field of view. So if you have a camera in this room, so you can only monitor the fall in this particular room. The moment you're outside the room, you're not being monitored, right? So I think the way it would go eventually, it will be a mix of some wearable and some camera that can work in the home, outside the home setting. For example, in the dementia unit, they have cameras in the common areas, but not in the rooms because of the privacy concerns, right? So what do we do in that situation? But a lot of the people do not like wearable devices. So the issues are beyond technology. It's more about usability. It's more about acceptance of technology. It's more about compliance, right? So in my view, the future research should look into both the factors. And definitely if we have both data from both the sides, then we can build more robust kind of systems that can reduce these false alarms, unwanted alarms and things like that. Yeah, that's how I would say that.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we're just about to run out of time here, so we will wrap things up. I thank everybody so much for the really insightful and thoughtful questions. There are a few comments we didn't get to in the chat box, but I would encourage you to have a read through them, a lot of personal reflections and other comments. I know that for a lot of us, this topic really resonates very strongly professionally, but I'm sure that most of us also have personal experiences with falls and the ramification of falls. So it's really remarkable that we are seeing such exciting research in this space. And so I thank the speakers again, and I'd like to take this moment to ask for any final reflections from our panelists, starting with Andrea and then Shiroz.
I saw there's a little comment in the chat, that a reminder that that winter is here and that slips on ice are a big contributor. And so you want to get your stability banks really full, and also make sure you've got good footwear. And so there's some good research being done at my research institute, Rate My Treads, that helps you pick out the best winter footwear. But I think the other message I want to give is, like, you don't have to be so scared of falls. Have some confidence that you've got the stability resources that you need. Take appropriate precautions, and then and then enjoy your life, because that's really important. You don't want to worry about falls to dominate. And so we talk about it a lot, but they're rare, and most of your days will be fall free.
Excellent. Shiroz?
Yeah, just trust your physiotherapist, and be active. I think that is more important, and it is an unfortunate thing. We can fall. Anybody can fall, but just try to be positive. Take part in your if there is a rehab program, if there is a fall prevention program. KITE has a fantastic program. So yeah, talk to your physiotherapist and just take it positive. I would say, do not let it overtake you. There's no point in staying inside and fearing the fall. It should be okay.
I love that as a final message. It's a great tone to set. So I thank everybody so much. That's it for today. If you'd like to watch the webinar again or share it with a friend, just a reminder, you'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel in about a week. So thanks to everybody, our panelists and our guests and our participants. Thanks for coming, and good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon.